Okay, let's just dive right in. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack a seriously fascinating academic paper today, and it completely reframes one of the most complex, seemingly endless conflicts in human history, the situation at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The paper is called The Stewardship of Abraham's House, and honestly, it challenges basically everything we think we know about how to approach this sacred space.
So, if you follow the news at all, or, read history, or listen to political and religious leaders, you hear this one question constantly. Who has sovereignty? Who holds the ultimate historical or legal claim? Put simply, who actually owns the Temple Mount? The entire modern debate revolves around this single, fiercely contested idea of possession.
But the author of our source text throws a massive curveball here, introducing a really bold, paradigm-shifting thesis. The paper argues that we've actually been framing this entire debate around the wrong question. From a biblical perspective, the primary issue isn't about who gets to hold the keys or possess the land. The real question is, who has been entrusted to take care of God's house?
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The wrong question. 2. The principle of stewardship. 3. A house for all. 4. A shared Abrahamic reality. And finally, 5. The ministry of reconciliation. The paper lays out a really clear theological framework that moves us from the usual mindset of ownership straight into the biblical concept of stewardship. Basically, the idea is that every human claim we make is ultimately a claim of stewardship, simply because, God alone is the actual owner.
That brings us to Section 1, the wrong question and why we need to rethink sovereignty.
We really have to rethink our language here because using the word ownership is just inherently flawed. The author uses this great, super relatable analogy. Imagine someone walks into your house and asks which one of you owns the place. You'd probably look at them like they're crazy, right? Because you don't own it, your parents do. You live there, you decorate your room, you definitely have chores and responsibilities, but there is a huge difference between living in a house and owning it. The paper points out that humans are given this incredible responsibility over the earth and its sacred spaces, but that absolutely does not equal ownership. God is the owner.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the principle of stewardship, a universal biblical mandate.
So if we don't own these spaces, what exactly is our role? Let's define this clearly, because honestly, this is the most critical vocabulary word in this entire explainer. Stewardship is the faithful responsibility to care for what belongs to God. It's a responsibility we've been entrusted with, not an absolute possession.
The crucial thing here is really grasping the contrast between these two mindsets. The language of ownership? That leads to demanding rights, desiring total control, and ultimately excluding others. It's basically a recipe for endless conflict. But the language of stewardship? That leads to taking on responsibilities, exercising care, and offering hospitality. One mindset builds walls while the other tends a garden.
To put it another way, the author compares humans to the world's biggest library helpers. Think about it. We get to use the books, enjoy them, and learn from them, but we definitely do not own them. And because we don't own them, we certainly shouldn't be scribbling in them with crayons. God trusts us with something amazing, and He expects us to not turn it into a disaster.
Moving on to Section 3, a house for all, and the true purpose of the temple. Because, just like having a treehouse in your backyard doesn't mean you own the whole yard, the temple was built for God, but it was never meant to trap Him inside.
The prophets throughout Scripture were actually very clear about what God expected in His house. Their message was incredibly strong. Worship without justice and mercy is completely empty. The author uses another fantastic analogy here. Imagine giving your mom this beautifully crafted Mother's Day card, but then turning around and hitting your brother 5 minutes later. The card isn't the problem. You are. Singing songs to God doesn't give anyone a free pass to be cruel afterward. Worship is supposed to change your heart, not just cover up bad behavior.
The paper includes some deeply powerful historical quotes from Sarah Aronson that bring some real gravity to these theological concepts. She wrote, "Our dear one set off on his journey with his goodwill, knowing what danger he was putting himself in. And later, they will certainly hang me, but all their cruelties to us are in vain." These words really inject the deep emotional resonance and the very real human cost of historical conflict into the conversation. They remind us that this call for justice, mercy, and steadfast love isn't just some academic theory. It's intensely personal, and it matters so much in the face of human cruelty.
Section 4, a shared Abrahamic reality, and what faithfulness looks like under changed circumstances. So how exactly are believers supposed to respond to the incredibly complex history of the Temple Mount? Well, by remaining faithful even when circumstances change. If you trace the historical formation of Israel, the people constantly had to adapt, from the wilderness to the First Temple to exile in Babylon, all the way into the present day. The author compares it to a school getting a leaky roof and having to hold class in the library for a month. You can't just sit there crossing your arms yelling, "This isn't my classroom." You still have to learn fractions, right? You have to do the good, faithful thing in the reality you actually find yourself in.
And the reality of the Temple Mount today is incredibly layered. The site is inherently bound to Judaism, with its profound historical and covenantal roots. At the same time, it is home to enduring Islamic worship and centuries-old sanctuaries. And of course, it holds deep spiritual significance for Christians as a place integral to the life of Christ. The paper lays this out totally neutrally. Simply erasing one history to satisfy another is not the answer. The real challenge is stewarding a site that is already sacred to all three. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the Ministry of Reconciliation and the Church's Role.
So what is the role of the Church in all of this? The paper looks specifically at the Catholic Church's non-territorial responsibility at this highly contested site. Sarah Aronson reflected on this kind of solitary mission, saying, "And if there were a few people who could understand me, there aren't many of them left." It beautifully captures that lonely, often very difficult call to be among the few who truly understand the mission of peace. It's this quiet, steadfast understanding that stands in total contrast to the loud, aggressive desire for political control.
The author explains the Church's role using a really funny but accurate analogy: the car seat fight. Imagine two kids just screaming in the back of the car over who gets the best seat. If an adult jumps in and says, "Great news, everyone, I've solved the problem by declaring the entire car is mine," well, they haven't helped at all. They've just become a bonus problem. The Church isn't there to claim the car as her own. She is there to stop the hostilities so everyone can just get to where they need to go safely.
This translates into some very clear, actionable steps. The Catholic responsibility entails 5 specific things: reconciliation, mediation, preservation, hospitality, and peacemaking. It's a ministerial role. The Church prioritizes mediating peace and preserving the sacredness of the site way above any desire for political sovereignty or territorial conquest. The paper brings this whole argument together with one final, absolutely brilliant metaphor. Imagine a group of cousins inheriting their grandma's house. Everyone has a different claim. One says they lived there first, another says they've been paying for the upkeep, another says all the best family memories happened there. Everyone is just shouting at each other. But then they find a note from Grandma that says, "This house is still mine, take care of it, do not wreck it. And for goodness sake, stop fighting in the hallway."
And that right there is the absolute core of stewardship. The temple belongs to God before it belongs to anyone else. The author makes it super clear the solution here is not some theological smoothie where we all just pretend everyone believes the exact same doctrines. Differences exist and they definitely matter, but the solution is treating the site truthfully as God's house, and that demands reverence, justice, and respect for the people who are currently in it.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. As we look at the incredible history, the really deep wounds, and the undeniable sacred beauty of the Temple Mount, the ultimate question is staring us right in the face. Will humanity continue to act as entitled owners, endlessly fighting in the hallway? Or can we finally step up, embrace our shared responsibility, and become faithful stewards of God's house? That is something for all of us to think deeply about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.